So far, every time I've asked ChatGPT to generate me a programming exercise, it's come up with what I would consider a code writing practice exercise, which would be here's a problem description, write some code for it. And certainly so far, over the past few videos of exercises, I've written some code and had to debug it. In some cases, I've even had to ask ChatGPT to explain itself a little bit. But I don't know that I've gotten any, first order debugging practice. So in other words, here's some code that's broken. I've got no idea why it's broken and I have to fix it. So let's see whether we can get ChatGPT to generate that kind of exercise for me. So I'm learning C programming and I want some debugging practice. Now I'm worried that if I just say this, it may not know what features of the language I know, and it's going to suggest something that's full of features that I've never used before. So I'm going to say, so far, I've learned about variables and types, like int and float. Let's see, what else? Loops, for and while, functions, and character input with getchar. Can you generate a debugging exercise that involves some or all of those features? Of course! I'd be happy to help me with that. All right, let's take a look at what it generated. I'm going to be a bit selective with this. So if it tries to use a feature that we don't know yet or that I don't want to worry about today, I'm going to ask it to give me a new exercise. Okay, here's a simple C program. I'm going to skim over this. Okay, so it seems to be involving factorial. That's interesting. And then the program itself, though, uses scanf. So we know enough by now to know that scanf is a function that reads input from the user. However, I don't want to worry about scanf for debugging purposes. So the issue is, although we've seen scanf in passing, and we'll cover it in more detail in the next couple of weeks, if I'm asking it for a debugging exercise, it's going to generate code that has bugs, and I don't know where those bugs are. So if the bugs happen to involve the call to scanf, and actually, spoiler alert, it turns out that in this case there is actually a bug in this call to scanf, I don't want to be responsible for debugging a function I haven't used very much yet. So I'm going to ask it to rewrite this exercise. I don't want to use scanf in any way. Can you generate a new exercise that doesn't use scanf? Of course. Okay, let's see what it comes up with now. Oh, come on. Okay, so if I skim over this, it looks like maybe it's a very similar exercise to before. The problem is that if you notice these two lines, that doesn't look like anything you've seen so far in this course, and that's because these are using features from after midterm 1. I don't know anything. I don't know about arrays. So this feature here is called an array. And this function call here is related to a topic called file IO that we're going to cover in November, or file IO. Can you generate an exercise that only uses the concepts I mentioned earlier? Hopefully it remembers what I was talking about. All right, let's try again. Absolutely! Here's a debugging exercise that sticks to the concepts you've learned. Oh, I'm a bit skeptical. All right, okay. So this is another example of an array. It might be a neat exercise, and I'd be happy to come back and look at this in, week 10, but come on. That exercise uses arrays. I just said I don't want to debug anything using arrays. Okay. I apologize. Yes, it's very good at being sorry. Let's take a look at what it comes up with now. All right, so it looks like it's still going to be a factorial calculator. Ooh, that's weird. Okay, fair enough. I mean, I can't be too picky. This does seem to only use features that we've already learned, although I have a premonition what all this is all about, and it's going to be pretty crunchy, but okay, this is what I've gotten myself into. Okay, so I'm going to go over here. I'm going to replace all of this. I'll even replace my header comment because I guess I didn't write this code. I'm going to replace all of it with the code that ChatGPT generated. I don't know what it's going to throw at me in terms of bugs. And I have to leave open the possibility that it doesn't do its job properly. We've already seen ChatGPT sometimes doesn't understand us. And so it might not even actually generate code with bugs in it. In some cases, it could actually end up that it generates perfect code and says it has a bug. But whatever, we'll get to the bottom of that. So it looks like it compiled. So whatever bugs it had are bugs that I guess are logical errors and not syntax errors. So I'm going to run the program and just see what happens and see if I can figure out what's going on. Okay, welcome to the factorial calculator. Enter a number. Well, fair enough. I'm going to enter the number 2. The factorial of 2 is 2. Okay, so we know a thing or two about factorials by now. I think that's correct. We'll try again. The factorial of 3 should be 6. Looks like that's good. Okay, the factorial of 4 should be 24. Yeah, everything's looking good so far. Factorial of 5 is 120. Oh, okay, so I'm not noticing any problems with this factorial calculator. Okay, let's try the factorial of 10. We know from having done the factorial problem over and over again that this is the factorial of 10. Okay, well, I'm waiting. Okay, factorial of 11. Now I'm going to go over here to my other screen, and I'm just going to quickly compute the factorial of 11. And that's correct. This is the factorial of 11. So I'm already a little bit skeptical. After all of the negotiation I had to do with ChatGPT, and I wanted some code with bugs, it doesn't seem like it's generated code with any obvious bugs. And skimming over it, if you're looking at code like a black box, so if you've been given some code and you're told it's broken and you're debugging it like I'm doing here, you're just running the code, then the first thing you try doing is just give it a bunch of different inputs and see what happens. It's possible there's some bug in this code relative to whatever ChatGPT thinks the code is supposed to do, but as far as I can tell, the point of this program is to compute factorials, and all of the factorials that I've tried so far have come out looking good. A lot of this program looks a bit bizarre to me. So, for example, this loop here, this is actually a way of reading an integer from the user. Now, the way we would read an integer from the user in CSE 111 involves that scanf function. And because I told ChatGPT not to use the scanf function, it has ingeniously come up with this bit of code that is sort of a home-brewed version of what the scanf function would do here. So I don't know quite what it thinks I'm going to find wrong with this program, but fair enough. That's what I got myself into with this series of videos. Let's go back and ask it for a hint. Okay, so let's see. Check for any potential bugs. Okay, can you give an example of an input where this program functions incorrectly? So maybe it's thinking about stuff like, what if I enter a negative number or something, which I think wouldn't be very fair because obviously we already discussed this earlier in a different video, but why would I want to compute the factorial of a negative number? And I mean, certainly it's good to have a program that's resilient against errors, but I don't know exactly what bugs it expects me to find. So I'm going to ask for this clarification. Okay, we'll wait for it to finish thinking. Certainly. Let's consider an example where the program might not work as intended. Okay, so suppose that the user enters the input 123A, which isn't a number. Okay, well, that's interesting. So I suppose fair enough. I should have some way to handle cases where the thing the user enters isn't a number. The program is designed to read characters until it encounters a non-digit character. So in this case, it would read 1, 2, 3, and A. Since A is not a digit, the loop will terminate. However, the program will still calculate a factorial using the numerical value 123, which is incorrect. Okay, well, that's fair. I suppose you could consider that to be a bug in the program. So I think what it's saying is if I run the program and I enter, let's say I want factorial of 4, but then I enter some garbage, it just goes and computes the factorial of 4. Where really, I guess it's arguing that what I should be doing is detecting that there's a problem with my input. That is, the user didn't just enter a number, they entered a bunch of junk. And how important that is depends, I guess, on what language and what course you're taking. In CSE 111, we do tend to adopt the principle that if we ask the user for a number, it's sort of their fault if they don't enter a number. But okay, let's see if we can fix this bug. So I understand now what ChatGPT found, and I guess the issue is that it wants me to report if the user enters literally anything other than digits, then I should just quit and say, I don't know what to do. You've entered something that clearly isn't a number. So if I look up inside of this loop it's constructed, this peculiar calculation is a way of turning a sequence of digit characters that the user enters into a number. It's not the way I would do this. As I said earlier, I would use the scanf function. But okay, ChatGPT is using this calculation, which is valid for this purpose. Notice how before it does that, it verifies that the character it read was a digit. And so this test here, although again, not the way I would write this test here is a way of checking whether the character CH is a digit. So it's a character corresponding to the digit 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to add an else to this if statement. And the else corresponds to, this is the case where the character entered was not a digit. And so ChatGPT thinks this should be an invalid input. So I'm going to say report to the user that the input is invalid. The character, and I'm going to put I'll just print the character back out, is not a digit. And then I'll print the character, and then I'm going to quit the program. And so one way of quitting the program from the middle of the program easily is if you ever return from main, the program ends. So I'm just going to return from main right here because I can't compute the factorial if I've encountered an error case. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And one thing I'm going to observe here is that although, yes, by the definition ChatGPT is using, this is a bug in the program, it's a pretty hard bug to spot. And you can see I had to ask for clarification because ChatGPT never actually told me what the expectations of the program were. If I were to provide it a problem statement, then it would be much easier to figure out whether what it does is complying with that or not. Instead, it just said, here's a finished program. I don't know what problem statement this program was meant to implement. Okay, so we'll try doing this. I'm going to try computing the factorial of 3. Okay, that still works. I'm going to try computing the factorial of 4. That still works. Oh, 24. Okay, so we know already that if we compute very large factorials, we're going to get erroneous results. That isn't, I wouldn't call that a bug in the program. When we work with large enough numbers, we're going to have that problem anyway. So the factorial of 4 is 24. The factorial of 5 is 120. But now let's see what happens if I enter some junk. Okay, so here it says, sorry, the character A is not a digit, and then it quits. It doesn't print out that the factorial of 3 is anything because it got fed up because I entered something that wasn't a digit. I'm going to say that as far as I can tell, that's fixed. I wonder if I can ask ChatGPT to take a look at my code. I don't know whether it'll give me any useful feedback, but let's see if it'll do that. Here is my fixed code. Let me know what you think. I'll just paste it right in. Your fixed code looks great. And then I guess it's going to try and tell me what I did. You've added the necessary condition to handle cases where the character entered is not a digit. By providing feedback to the user and returning a non-zero value from main, you're making the program more robust and user-friendly. So I 100% agree with this feedback here. So it's, and I actually didn't mention what I was doing when I returned 1. So obviously I caught the problem by using this else clause. I printed the user a nice message saying that something was wrong. I didn't necessarily say I'm going to quit now, but I did say there's a problem. And I returned from main immediately. So I didn't continue running the program and actually try to recover from the error. Specifically though, ChatGPT is observing that I've returned 1 from main. And this has come up in the lectures by now, but the return value of main isn't something we tend to care too much about in CSC 111, but it does have some historical significance. Traditionally, when main returns 0, that's a way of indicating to the operating system or anybody else that's listening that the program behaved correctly. So 0, in a strange inversion of the usual meaning of 0 versus non-zero in C, a return value of 0 from main is a way of signaling that the program completed successfully. A return value of anything else, so for example 1, is a way of indicating that some kind of error occurred. And so ChatGPT is observing that the combination of a message and a non-zero exit status from main is a way of handling that error gracefully. So it's making the program more robust. Your code should work correctly now. Well done. Well, I'm pleased. That's nice. That's nice, flattering feedback. I think what I'm going to do is make another video for the next question I ask, because I think I want to do a few more debugging exercises aided by my new colleague.